It's been a while since I last heard a new A Place to Bury Strangers album. I haven't kept up with them since high school, like 6 or 7 years ago. I've always liked their unique noise rock sound, mixing in like psychedelic rock and space rock, but I always felt shorted by the vocals. They're so cold and lifeless in an unflattering way that any song I do like from them is in spite of them. And the same sentiment carries over into this new album for me. The sound itself is as disruptive and as ear-piercing as ever. The sound design in terms of effects and stuff is immaculate. On some songs you will hear every grain of static that is just flowing through the instrumental as they louden and wreak havoc on your ears, but again, the vocals are just not up to snuff. They're just soporific in all possible scenarios. It doesn't matter if you're having a driving riff or a cascading wall of sound or even hints of a dance beat. They just detract from the overall experience. The handful of songs I did like, again, were in spite of the vocals. The instrumental did all the heavy lifting. Overall, Sidewalks and Skeletons, I remember for being at the forefront of the subtle emergence of Witch House last decade, and they made some noise with White Light, a Witch House album, which I think was pretty great. Haven't kept up with them since, so I was interested to see how things have or have not changed, and Exorcism is a mixed bag. A good portion of the songs are pretty predictable and lack bite and allure of any kind. The witchiness factor is overtaken by the EDM bits, and once I started to go through the album again, the attempts of dark pop with the featured vocalists didn't really land. They fell flat. Some of the moodier stuff didn't really strike a chord with me. Not to say there weren't some songs that got me in a rhythm, but that was mostly because of how hyper exaggerated they are. They just sound like hyper laser shows, and I think that attraction was probably what had me interested. Overall, not their best work. It's I think Hippo Campus have the means to be a high-quality indie pop band and have proven that they can hit some home runs here and there in terms of singles, but in regards to an album, they're usually just mixed bags. I initially thought LP3 would be an ambitious endeavor because the opener is great. Too Young to Die has a Bon Iver flair with how the vocals are processed. The saxophone is quite delicately used, and the industrial like beat break refrain was pretty awesome to hear. But nothing else on the album really measures up to that level of like instrumental ambition. The rest of the album is laden with brightly lit indie pop, and a good portion of the tracks kind of lack direction in my opinion. Blew It, Bang Bang, Ride or Die, Listerine to me didn't really have that many fulfilling qualities about them. Production was tame, the choruses and verses were pretty forgettable. It was like I was hearing a less budgeted version of Vampire Weekend. But they did hit a few home runs for me for sure. I like the low-fat pop-punk of Ashtray. Semi-Pro has some beautiful vocal harmonizations during its last leg. Scorpio has nice guitar licks and a chill vibe, and I love the song Boys. I think it's the best song on here bar none. The hook on here will linger in your head for days. All in all, I thought it was okay. It's pretty much on par with how I've enjoyed their other stuff. Got this one recommended to me, and it's pretty good. A big draw about it is how spacey and acrylic the krautrock sound is. The use of analog synths and swirling textures propagate an astral aesthetic that is rooted purely in grooves with subtle progressions going about in the background, also throwing in some elements of cold wave in there for good measure. Vocals aren't the most standout thing about the album, but they certainly feed into these carefully crafted atmospheres. Some of my favorites include Post-Human Blossom. I love the saxophone usage on the closing track, and my absolute favorite on here is most definitely Brick Break. The creepy ass beeping and swirling darkness and driving vocal melodies is just amazing. From start to finish, it's a fun listen, some lulls here and there, but not really to a degree of decrementing the experience as a whole. Give it a shot, and I'm thankful this was recommended to me. This is a follow-up EP to her album last year, which I thought was great. Marissa is very well known for her gauzy, reverbed renditions of dream folk and country, but made a big leap towards depthful storytelling on her more recent stuff. Those components certainly carry over into this EP, and admittedly, while these just might be leftovers from her last album, there are some pretty tasty leftovers. Guns on Deck is a grim tale of a queen who has grown ill of seeing so much bloodshed and young corpses and wants to escape to the ocean side to get away from everything. Marissa's dreary performance drives it home, and it's kind of gut-wrenching to listen to. All of the Eclipses is more pleasing, dreary dream folk. I loved how gritty Saunders Ferry Lane sounded, and Seabird is a decent dream pop tune with some woodwinds thrown into the mix. All in all, it's a good EP, not any barn burners or anything, but a worthy follow-up. Rolo Tomassi's brand of cinematic post-metal mathcore is still going pretty strong with this new album, alongside the riveting riffs and pummeling black metal screams and grooves. The gentler melodic segments provide a good amount of internal catharsis. The opening song, for example, is a brooding one where the piano melodies are just too powerful to ignore. Pair that with the grimly vocal performance and lyrical emphasis on spiritual ambiguity, and you have a great tone setter. Quickly after that, the album transitions into the punishing mathcore sound, but it always finds a way to infuse these shining piano and vocal tidbits in ways that feel meaningful and organic. Songs like Mutual Ruin, Closer, To Resist Forgetting, Cloaked, and The End of Eternity just hits these pristine points where beauty and brutality become one sonically and vocally. Even though each song follows a set blueprint in terms of progressions and structures and crescendos, they all feel unique in their presentation. I thought this album was great, very few grievances from me, loved it, check it out. It's one of the most boring albums I've heard all year. Nothing about this album stuck with me at all. The production outside of the first song is sleep-inducing. Like someone could be trying to incapacitate me and they could forget their chloroform at home. But all they would need is a pair of headphones, stick them in my ears, play this album, and it would probably have the same effect. The slow and obtuse chords and basic-ass synthesizers make up 90% of the sound palette, and none of the instrumentals are really engaging or provoke any feeling of any kind except boredom. No sonic depth, no stylistic flourishes, really nothing in that department. Cate herself is not a bad vocalist by any means, and her songwriting can be interesting, but none of the melodies or harmonies or even the tales being told were really able to capture my interest. The album's pace is also pretty slow with very little in terms of payoffs. That 43-minute overall runtime does not go by quick. Yeah, I didn't enjoy it very much. Not my kind of thing. Animal Collective, as of recently, have been kind of inconsistent with their output quality-wise. Last decade was filled with ups and downs, but this new album of theirs, I feel, is their strongest in a while. Stylistically speaking, the sound the group has cultivated on this album is very enchanting and hypnotizing, and that is accredited to how many layers of swirling psychedelics and watery washes of electronics and passive bass tones there are. I will admit the album at first kind of just bounced off of me. I couldn't quite get a quality grip of what I was hearing, but upon my second listen it just clicked with me. I fell in love with the album. Vocally, it's very creative and well performed. Sonically, it is submersive. The opening Dragon Slayer has a folk's tale tinge on it, and Panda Bear rides the production beautifully. It's a great way to kick off the album, and then you got songs like Prester John and Walker that have some pretty standout bass grooves. The creme de la cremes for me, however, are Strung with Everything, Cherokee, and Royal and Desire. Strung with Everything is a pensive, life-affirming jam that grows more and more wholesome as the song progresses. Cherokee is a woozing trip. The gradient and texture work is great. And the closing track, Royal and Desire, was a great crepuscular send-off. There's just a confidence in this album that I haven't heard from them in a while, and it's just very cool to see them recapture it. This, in my opinion, is a great album and a welcome return to form as well. It has been a slow start to the year for hip-hop so far, and with a lot of the bigger releases coming later in the year, I think this is the perfect time to sink your teeth into the Saba album if you haven't already. I've always liked Saba's style of contemporary hip-hop. His sound of conscious hip-hop mixed with neo soul will catch your ear in one way or another because his sense of melody is strong and he writes some potent introspective lyrics. Do those components always translate to a great song? No, but he has proven to be consistent throughout his discography, and this album to me is pretty good. Some of the standout tracks to me are Soldier, Still, Stop That, and the title track. His flows are good, the beats are mellow and somewhat jazzy, and occasionally can be very luscious, and most of the features do their thing. It can be generic at times with some of the more contemporary songs, but there's still an ample amount of variety to be had. Overall, it's a solid album, definitely worth checking out. Be the Cowboy was an interesting album from Mitski, which sounded like she was taking kind of like a revitalized direction with her music. How she would follow that up was the biggest question I had for this new one. She chooses to encapsulate her signature writing style in an 80s sheen with sounds of new wave and synth pop with songs like Love Me More and The Only Heartbreaker without venturing into the realm of her music becoming too bright and sugary, because that is not the case here. She is still as devastatingly emotional a songwriter as ever. The song Working for the Knife, for example, is pretty soul-crushing with how she sings about her creative aspirations to be a creator in film, going up in smoke, and like every time she watches a movie, that's all she can think about. Also, the Working Under the Knife theme seems to reference how pain and suffering is monetized in the form of entertainment. Stay Soft is another one where she sings about how being thinly skinned will get you killed in a figurative sense. A handful of other songs are also crushing, and the album has its high points and pretty memorable moments, but as an overall body of work, it does have its shortcomings. Some of the instrumentals that focus on an ambient atmosphere feel underbaked and sucks the wind out of some of the more tender moments on the album, like the songs Everyone and I Guess. There were a couple of other songs I wasn't that big on, but overall it's a good album. It's a solid addition to her catalog. Considering how much of a roaring success their debut album was last year, most were curious to see how they would follow up one of the most exciting and daring rock albums in recent memory. Or for the first time presented its themes under the lens of a manic, anxious fervor. Ants From Up Here takes a more under-the-knife, introspective approach, building up to revealing emotional climaxes through pensive instability. The production incorporates like luscious chamber music, adding a beauty to the madness while still retaining their blend of post-rock and jazz. Songs like Concord, for example, sees Isaac singing his heart out about his insecurities and shortcomings, and the instrumental starts off cool and measured, slowly building alongside Isaac's vocal progression. Then the song just bursts in its last leg with some pretty depressing but affirming lyrics about reviving one's inner child as a way to start over again. Almost every song here reaches that level of build and payoff because the songwriting is just fantastic. The performances, both instrumentally and vocally, are too strong. Even on the songs I wasn't that high on, I still was like, God damn, it sounds good. Other songs I loved include The Place Where He Inserted the Blade and Basketball Shoes, the former being a moving, loving, yet worrying ballad about Isaac's need for someone when he is losing his mind and feeling hopeless, and the latter being a three-part epic with its own intermissions in between. It's like a triptych play packed into one song. I mean, what else can I really say about this album that everyone else isn't already saying? It's fantastic. It is bittersweet though, because while this album is another roaring success, Isaac leaving the band will definitely have a huge impact on their future. I'm curious to see how the band moves forward, whether or not they're going to find a new vocalist or just make instrumental albums, but I think they're still quite capable of making great music. But that aside, it's a stellar sophomore album. I loved, and I do mean loved, Yeule's debut album, Serotonin 2. It's very rare that an album makes me feel as if I was having an outer body experience from my cybernetically enhanced body as I roamed around a neon-soaked cyberpunk city with digital angels and revenants caressing me in their sorrow and wisdom, but that's exactly what that album did for me. So, of course, I was excited to listen to this. Yeule has an incredible talent for sonic storytelling. Their use of experimental electronics and glitch aren't just for show. These elements lend themselves into the themes of the album and into the mind of the album's protagonist, who is perhaps a modified human or an android trying to balance their new directives with their old humanity. That narrative ambiguity creates hard-hitting lyrics about love, depression, drugs, and existentialism. Alongside their darkest thoughts and brightest hopes, there are so many contrasting pieces in play with the music and themes as well. Depravity versus beauty, life versus death, what is real, what isn't, is life better in the digital cloud or in the punishing real world? Those opposing forces are constantly going at it, and yet it's extremely coherent in the grand scheme of things. I never felt like I was missing the plot or I was not able to follow along because the songwriting never overshadows a theme. Yeule's vocal performances are moving and dreadful and mystic and terrifying and beautiful, and the production is as immersive as ever. It's nowhere near as dreamy as Serotonin 2, but it excels in unveiling its darkness. It's an incredible experience, and some people will listen to this and be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But to me, this album is something special. I absolutely loved it. My favorite of the week by far, and right now it's my favorite of the year. That concludes this episode of last week's music. Here's a tier list of how much I enjoyed the albums I heard last week to help visualize my overall opinions. That being said, I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode's albums that you heard that I didn't mention. Leave a comment down below. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing, and thank you so much for watching the video. I will see you guys next time.